Okay, well, thank you for joining us at Voluntary Virtues, and we just finished watching a debate between um, Victor Pross and Wayne Simmons, free market anarchism versus constitutional um, government. And we have our guests, our roundtable participants are joining us now. So let's see, we've got Cody with us. How you doing, Cody?
Very well. Thanks for having me.
And looks like we got Michael joining us. Michael, are you going to be able to talk with us?
I will be with you for a little while. Not sure how long. My wife is cooking me dinner right now, so.
All right, and of course we're going to have other people joining us. And I did, if you are a host on the Voluntary Virtues Network, please join us and pop on in. I sent a link out in the Facebook group. All right, so let's take a look at the beginning of the debate with the initial opening statements. What did you think of Victor's opening statement, albeit interrupted? Corey?
Yeah, Cody. It was. It's good to get definitions out there, off the table. But my first notes that I made actually was in Simmons' opening statements. Because his claim was that government was, almost a moral institution with the experiment of the United States, or that is the United States, but it was philosophy in the 20th century that ruined that for us. And to his own admission, he actually said, taught in our schools. Well, my first thought was, well, who was teaching it in the schools?
Well, whose schools were they?
Yeah, it was supposedly the more moral version of the government we have today that corrupted the minds of the citizenry that caused the corruption of the government. It was a circular argument, in my opinion, because every reference he made to the change in the mindset of the society and the philosophy of the society stems from the teachings that was going on through government schools. So that's kind of where I started my notes. But did you have some input on Pross's opening statements? Because I thought Pross was very well spoken today. I really enjoyed a lot of his arguments. But
well, I think that that he initially he missed a big point about what the difference is between what is a government and what is not a government. The idea that a government is legitimized, to me, is the crux of what makes government government. It is legitimized a violation of the rules, and he kind of made that point, but it's about the mindset specifically in the person, in the society, in the individual's mind that says, all right, well, these guys, they've got special rules that they can go by, and to me that needed to be a little bit more strongly pointed out. But yes, that's the significant difference, and it actually underlies what it is that makes a lot of the problems that were brought up by Wayne disappear. The idea that yes, you're going to have some vigilante justice guy running around and shooting people and being judge, jury, and executioner. Well, yeah, maybe that's going to happen, but then nobody expects that person to have the right to do so, and some people will kind of jump in and say, "Stop that."
as they would now, like the situation's no different now, right? I mean,
right.
Somebody's walking down the street and enforcing their own vigilante justice. We don't necessarily wait for the cops to intervene, and the state really isn't doing much about that right now anyway. So the burden of proof seems to be a little misplaced there.
Yeah, and also the question that Victor asked in his opening statement is, where does this government get its authority from? And I don't think that was really clearly answered by Wayne as far as the discussion. I mean, he did at least say, in his shirt example, consent, but when he was pushed by the question that was asked from the audience, how do you consent when there's only one option? You know, if they prohibit you from choosing anything else, it's like, well, you have the choice. You have the free will and the ability to choose, my daughter. You can choose to marry whoever it is that you want, but you have to marry this guy. This is the only one you can choose from.
Right, and not marrying is not an option.
Yeah.
Can I jump in real quick?
Absolutely.
Hey, it's Mike Shanklin, everybody. Hope you guys are having a great night. I had a really good time moderating that debate. I thought they both were very fair for each other. I think them being friends really helps make my job a lot easier in that situation. The thing I kept seeing confusion on, which I wish I could have said something, but it's not my part, was obviously the confusion on what a government is, right? I mean, when we look at what Ayn Rand says, I think we can all agree that what she was talking about, this is where the dichotomy between a government and a state comes up. To me, really, self-government's really the only type of government that I see, which really, to me, isn't really government, really. So I just see the state, and this is the thing. Without involuntary taxation, you cannot have a state. End of story, right? Ayn Rand talked about voluntary taxation, right? To me, the word voluntary trumps the taxation word, which in this case means the secondary word, meaning or strength-wise chronologically. She was just confused on the word taxation itself. She really meant voluntary in general. So if anything, I think it only lends credence to Victor Pross's argument here, in which I, obviously a biased individual in this debate, but I tried to stay as out of it as I could. I do believe that even Ayn Rand's argument itself presupposes the anarcho-capitalist or anarcho-objectivist position in and of itself. They're both individualistic in nature, and to that ends, if she's talking about voluntary taxation, I mean, get real. That means no state, right? That just means no state. Once again, without it's about the funding, right? It always comes back to the funding. When we're talking about consent, he's only thinking about like the justice system coming after you and you going to court and you being like, well, what who cares if you get to go to this court or that court? But we're talking about the option to fund the state. We're talking about the option to fund the state, right? Not about the justice system that comes chasing after you afterwards. So he doesn't see the all-encompassing aspects of the state that we are obviously trying to point out. So I think that's a shortfall from Wayne Simmons' perspective right off the bat. If you can't see the funding being a part of the consent, then man, this consent thing really isn't really consent, right? So I'll leave it at that for you guys and see where you guys take it.
No, I agree, Michael, and I think that you're right in that there's a big blurred, confusing line in the definition of what Simmons was advocating for as far as a government. Because if it's consensual, by my understanding of what a government is, then it's not a government. If it's the only reason to have a government is because certain people are not consenting to abide by that governing authority. So, in its very definition, it seems like there's something wrong there that I wish we could have gotten some clarity on.
Well, keep in mind, as when he was pressed on that by the question from the peanut gallery, his answer for how, if you don't consent, if you don't want to be part of it, then you can move.
Right.
Never heard that argument before. What is the typical statist thing? You don't like America, move? Well, yeah, that kind of doesn't work very well. Why should I move when they're the ones that suck?
Hey, I don't know what you all are talking about. I just bought some oceanfront property in Somalia.
Oh, you did? Oh, good for you, man. Do you think you might be able to, have me come and stay there for a while I get things figured out?
Yeah, no, you come join me. I got Mogadishu's Most Wanted, keeping me up for a little while. I should be fine until you get there. Come on through.
Well, I'd like to welcome to the Voluntary Virtues After Hours. We have Kyron Pearson and we have Matthew. It's Mencel, right? Yeah, Matthew Massell, welcome. So are you both going to be able to contribute to your voices there, or is it just going to be your
Yes, I can contribute to voice.
All right, great. So as far as the opening statements, did you guys have any comments on those before we go into the other points of the show? Kyron?
Opening statements kind of didn't really, catch me. But I thought that Victor really spelled out a lot of key vocabulary and the definitions of what it meant in order to level out his argument, in order to have people understand what it is that he's saying, the initiation of force, anarchism. I would have liked if he had broken down. I don't think he exactly broke down what anarchy means in the etymology of the word. I think that always helps people to understand. But he did talk about the conflation between when people think it means chaos, and it doesn't. But all in all, I thought he spelled it out. I think he could have done a better job setting up his premise for his argument. But it is what it is. As far as I'll leave it at that for right now.
No comments on the other position. Wayne Simmons' opening statement. Any comments there?
Yeah, state is gonna state. I mean, I don't even know how to critique, a statist argument, other than just to not try to make fun of it to their face.
Well, I think what it really comes down to is a fear of warlords and mafias and gangs and stuff like that, which he doesn't realize the state is a mafia gang. He still thinks that you can have a consensual gang, or a consensual. I guess you can have a consensual gang. You can't have a consensual state, really. Okay, that's my point. And he's trying to act like you can have a consensual state. So all of the other premises that he has expounded on have built directly from that premise, that original premise.
Hey, by the way, Michael, you said something about me posting a link to this discussion, but you can't post links in YouTube.
Oh, they won't let you. Sometimes you can. They allowed you to at one point.
Well, not in ours, apparently. So
You
I mean,
can't post links in YouTube?
No, you can't.
I've done it before.
It says it. I tried to once during that discussion too, and it said that we had to post it in the description after the video was posted.
Ah, gotcha. So you can't do it live. Gotcha. Okay.
In the chat. In the
Do
chat.
it live.
Yeah. Fuck it. We'll do it live.
All right. Also, Michael, you saw that. Let me just post you the YouTube link in, and then you can maybe start spreading that around if you happen to be available. So there's the YouTube link, and
Exploitation over here. Look at this. I'm just joking.
shoot it out. Well, you're the one that said it was the link was going out, and so you're the one responsible for that.
Well, I thought you were gonna post it. Sorry, I thought you liked your show. My bad. All right, we're done sparring.
Okay,
Let's go back to analysis.
So then, moving on into some other points that they were making in this discussion, there was an analogy that Victor kind of made there near the end that I thought was really kind of interesting. The idea that if you don't have, God, where does morality come from? Well, if you don't have a state, where do laws come from? You think that that's kind of an appropriate analogy, that there is some sort of religious or faith-based attachment to the idea of governance being, somewhat special? If you don't have them, you can't do these things? Cody?
Oh, always. I think we see this in our daily interaction with people. It was just like the lady the other day who told me that I can't put something in somebody else's mailbox. I mean, she was literally offended, not because it was immoral, but because it was illegal. And she even admitted that it was not immoral, but she was offended because it was illegal. Well, why would you be offended by something that's illegal if it's not harming you, it's not damaging your property, it has nothing to do with you? just witnessing an action because it's illegal and you get offended by it pretty much is admitting an emotional attachment to the government and its authority in your life.
Well, I came into anarchism actually through atheism, and I've concluded and come to the understanding that both of them are just dogma, and really the issue of human understanding and human responsibility for yourself and logic comes from ridding your life of dogma, and so, in that way, I think that there's really no difference between religion and statism. As a matter of fact, the most ardent statists that I've met are atheists, who are, these people who are able to see through the dogma of religion, yet have somehow sort of completely missed asking those very same questions that they ask of religion, and using those same logical steps to deduce that there is no God. They failed to apply that same logic to that which is called the state, to these group of men and women who are willing to initiate force against others. I see it all the time. I'm dead serious. They are the hardest nuts to crack, and I don't mean that. I definitely mean that the pun intended. I'm reading the words.
Well, keep on going. Keep on going.
Oh, okay. But with that said, they his whole premise of government, being sort of where we gain our source of morality from. It's like these are people just like you. So if they're capable of giving you sort of morality, then you're just as capable of deciding your own morality as well. And as long as you're not hurting or harming anyone, then you should be allowed to do what it is that you want to do. And same for them. You don't need a group of people over you and in order to do so. But, again, it's sort of what Victor sort of brought up was that it seems that there's some kind of ethereal nature given to government, like it's some distant being, entity, essence in the universe that it, provides all the good and never does harm, and isn't responsible for any of the bad things that happen in the universe or in our particular context. And it's completely dogmatic. It takes in no factual information whatsoever in order to hold that stance. I mean,
I think a good analogy for how dogmatic it is actually is in his Simmons' argument that somehow a government is more ethical than DRMs, and he kept using examples of that. Well, basically, he's just talking about a monopolistic DRM. I mean, his version of what a government should be sounds very much like a private business, something that's consensually funded, and an objective set of laws that's agreed upon by rational people. Well, this is kind of what an anarchist is advocating for in DRMs from a functional standpoint, except that we believe that free market competition would improve the results of that, whereas obviously a monopoly, they'd have no incentive for being rational or improving or providing a quality service for the money or whatever. The list goes on and on. So it's interesting to me that he uses the same arguments against DRMs that we are actually using against the state, but somehow magically having one DRM would be more moral than having many DRMs.
So you're using the word DR or the acronym DRM. I'm used to DRO.
That's what I meant. Sorry.
Okay, so
just a misstatement. Sorry.
All right. So
DRM must be some kind of exercise move.
Well, it's kind of next to. No, it's not the same place on the.
It's a new drug, guys. That's what it is.
Well, it's the alphabet shift, All right, so as far as the idea that it is a DRO, the government is a DRO, and it's a monopoly. Victor never brought up that concept in his debate there. I think that it would have been a potentially strong point to make, but then I think that Wayne actually did that for him in certain respects, in saying that, look, you have to have a final arbiter, you have to have a final overarching ruling final arbiter that says, okay, well, you guys disagreed about this, you guys disagreed about that, and we're going to finally get the ultimate objective truth as to what is the final answer. And the question then comes, well, if he makes that claim that, all right, well, what are we going to do as far as, if there is some sort of objective or final arbiter, how do we deal with situations where the arbitrations continue and continue, and they never come to a conclusion as far as, one person has a claim and the other person has a differing claim. And I'd like to go with the example that he used during the debate of the parents who divorce and they have children. And the parent one insists that they want to teach their children, let's say, religion, and parent two wants to insist that they not teach the children religion. This is going to be a arbitration nightmare. There's no, how can you possibly arbitrate that? Yes, you can teach the child that you're going to go to hell and suffer forever if you don't listen to what Big Sky Daddy has to offer. Or, can you not? I don't know. How does that arbitration finally get resolved if we don't have some sort of, final arbiter? Corey? Oh. Cody.
Sorry, the thing that that I kept thinking during that whole statement and the whole argument there is twofold. First of all, he was describing how if you're paying one DRO as a service, and both parties are paying the same company, that they are not going to want to prosecute against their own client. And yet he's advocating for a monopoly of that system to be under. So that's the first flaw I saw, is that his problem was if two people are using the same company, well, in a government you have no choice but to use the same company. So that's the first flaw I saw. The second is, if you are using a DRO, you have entered into a detailed contractual agreement ahead of time of your own volition, and you've already agreed that these people may arbitrate against me if I break this contract, and you're agreeing to that up front. So that's two of the differences that I can see where it would obviously be far superior to have this arbitration in the hands of private citizens rather than a monopolistic government. I don't know if that answered your questions, but that's just two of the things that really kept going into my head as he was describing that situation, that analogy.
Okay, Michael, you wanted to comment?
Well, yeah, I guess my whole point here is that not only is it much better, sorry, my wife is in the background making the dinner right now. Not only is it much worse, or not much better to have you having your say on who the final arbiter is, so there can still be a final arbiter in some case, but just because the state does it doesn't mean it's not just better to have it the other way. It means it's really, really bad from the state perspective because of the resentment that it carries afterwards. In other words, if you're forced into arbitration, usually not only is it a system that is extremely, not only is it a system that is extremely, sorry about that over here. My cat's making some noise. Not only is it the resentment from the system itself, like let's say you have a judge who doesn't have much experience or expertise in a certain field. Well, in a free society, you're going to get to pick an arbiter that really is more experienced in a certain field of your choice. The state doesn't have that apparatus. It's very limited, right? So not only are you picking from these judges with limited knowledge, which can only come from the state, the central violent monopoly filled with the tragedy of the commons, but it builds resentment. It can increase racial tensions that might be justified. Maybe they're not justified, right? So it's all over the place. We never know. But if you're forced into an arbiter, it makes it. The point here is that it's even worse. We need to be focusing on the fact that the arbitration is so horrible through a violent monopoly like the state that you have no choice. This really can build up a lot of not only abuses, right? Because if you can just do whatever you want as on the judicial side of the justice system, well, obviously you're carte blanche. But on the flip side of this, if you're actually one of the victims that has this that's being put in this situation, that feeling of having no choice, it might not hit you consciously, but it will subconsciously, and it does feel disempowering, right? It's just like you have to go along with whatever this one judge says that you didn't even get to pick out. So I think it carries a lot of resentment with it. So it's not only that the free society is much better at solving, the final arbiter problem, especially with multi-tiered arbitration, but it's really about the fact that the state is just an absolute horrific arbiter, and that we think what we're living in right now is somewhat good, or like America's somewhat better than the rest of the world, is what you hear, right? I mean, it really just goes to show you, because the rest of the world has more government. It just goes to show you how bad it really is from the state perspective. When you look out at the proportional at the rest of the world, and really how much government they have per capita, etc. So I think one of the things that we have to realize is the state, what we live in right now, we can't really always see. The grass can be greener on the other side at times. We might not always want to believe that. It might be hard to get to that side, but the grass can actually be greener on the other side. And this is one of those cases where the state harms us so bad. We don't know what good justice is. It's not allowed. Plus the resentment that I think is held subconsciously within individuals. It's not much talked about.
Well, definitely. And I understand that, Kyron, you had some points you wanted to talk about on this as well?
I'm sorry, I got so distracted by
Michael's rant?
The cat's meowing. I went on a mental tangent. What were we talking about just now?
All right, well, I'll just go ahead and I'll redirect. Okay, one of the things that I found that Victor didn't do that I think is an imperative thing to do, he started to at the beginning, but he didn't continue this line of thinking throughout, at least not to the level that I would want, is that just like when it comes to an atheist trying to persuade or trying to discuss or debate a religious person, the burden of proof is upon the person who is making a positive claim. Okay, we are not making a positive claim with the claim of anarchy. We are saying that you have not justified the idea of a ruler. That there has not been a justification for a ruler. So therefore, we are anti rulers, anarchy. So anarchy. So to me, that he asked the person, when he asked, what is it that justify, where's the authority come from? That's great, but then keep going along that same line, and I don't see that Wayne really addressed the idea of, where does the authority come from, other than to kind of say, well, it used to be that there was gods that gave us authority, and there used to be these kings that had authority in monarchies and so on. But then somehow this makes it rational that there has to be some system that's like that. I didn't follow where his response to that went, and I didn't see any sort of justification for that. But just as a general question to you guys, I mean, do you think that having the person have to say, all right, I'm not going to argue that anarchy works this way or works that way, or that's not my job. I don't have to do that. You have to show that this is a system that is a requirement in order for these things to be done. You have to prove that there is some sort of justification for what it is that you're wanting to impose on everyone else. You guys, what do you guys think about that idea and the responses specifically about the authority question?
Yeah, I think it was like you're reading my notes. Actually, that was the next thing I was going to bring up was that burden of proof issue, and Victor Prost did make a really excellent statement, and I wish I could quote it verbatim, but he basically indicated that the individual precedes the state. Long before the state was in existence, we as individuals were in existence, and and that's why this burden of proof needs to be shifted back onto them. It's almost like, hey, you've had your chance. We've had hundreds of years of statism, and all we're asking for is our natural state, back. And by state, I mean our state of being, our state of nature back, as being individuals again. And it's interesting that Simmons used his argument of, well, what if there is a group of people abusing a person, such as Shira Law or whatever, who abusing women, and what is an anarchist state or an anarchist society going to do about that? Well, what is a statist society doing about that right now? That stuff exists all over. The reason you can use it as an example is because it's not being addressed as it is. So why should the burden of proof be on the anarchist to solve that problem ahead of time when you've had hundreds of years to figure that out?
Right. I completely agree with that point, and I thought Victor missed a wonderful opportunity to redirect the question that was asked of him as to how anarchy could provide what would happen, I guess, with vigilantism and anarchy, or what would prevent a DRO from running over the rights of everyone else. Well, what prevents government from doing it? Because we actually haven't even had an opportunity to practice these DROs or see if they even work, because government is running over people's rights. So, I mean, what's preventing government doing it? And if that's your issue, if that is your main concern as to why these DROs shouldn't be, then it should be your same argument as to why we need to get rid of government, because government is doing exactly the thing that you feared the DROs will do.
It's really funny to me how the same people who say, well, anarchy would just devolve into groups of individuals warring with each other and this kind of thing, is the same people who seem to think that a government can be restrained by a piece of paper. It's like,
I mean, it's like governments, and they don't see governments as being exactly what it is that they fear. They're afraid of groups of warring factions of marauding, rapists, kidnapping, murdering, looters going to war with one another for frivolous reasons, and them getting caught in the crossfire. That's exactly what the fuck is going on right now in the world. Like, how do you not see what you're looking at? What is wrong with people? How are they so detached from reality? How is the cognitive dissonance that damn strong?
Well, I think that didn't he say that that's how the world works? I mean, isn't that how the world works? Because that's government exists. That's the way the world works.
That is
But yeah, I never got that one, because it's like, cause in this particular one, if that's how the world works, then we're currently in a state of in a stateful society, in a society that he condones, right? So if using his argument, he saying this is how the world works, he tried to shot himself in the foot, in my opinion.
Well, my system is not responding immediately when I do this. I had some background noise from you earlier, Matthew, so I muted you, but apparently it didn't mute you, and then now it's going to mute you or whatever. So unmute yourself if we did hear that. I think you got through on your point there, but just go ahead and unmute yourself if in the future if you want to have another comment. So yeah, putting the burden of proof on the other when he says that's that's how the world works. When they make that response, that's how the world works. The claim is then, when we lived in a society where we had slavery, and somebody were to say as an argument for keeping slavery and not abolishing it, they say that's how the world works. How effective of an argument is that? It's not. It's an appeal to tradition fallacy. It's absolutely. mindless in its response. When I heard that, I was like, oh my God, what the hell is? You're doing the same standard everything. Nobody ever listens to the challenges, the arguments that point out that these things are stupid and wrong. You know, I think every single person should be required to, I mean, not necessarily required, but I think every person should expose themselves to the, I forget what the article was called. I think it's on Mises, might be on Rockwell, where the person goes through and it says these are the arguments for not abolishing slavery, and it lists all these, you know, like 10 different things that people say when they're arguing for the state, and they would be equally applicable to the argument to keep slavery. So if they were bad arguments for the slavery thing, then they're going to be bad arguments for the government thing too. And people just don't get that.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, I think that's what your words you may have been using for argumentum ad absurdum. We take your opponent's argument and you take it to almost the absurd level.
Yeah, yeah.
That may be what you were thinking of.
Well, also though, the appeal to tradition. I mean, but he did the you know, ad absurdum fallacy with the idea that yes, we're going to have individuals going around being judge, jury, and executioner. We already have people doing that. We have people doing that right now. There are people who go around and they murder people. They're judge,
Most
jury.
of them are called police, actually.
Yeah, a lot of them are called police, and they seem to get away with it too if they're wearing the right uniform. You know, the badges are granting special rights. So Victor had a question posed to him that I think that when he started to respond to it, he wasn't answering the question very well, and he finally got around to a point. But to me, he kind of like skirted the issue at the beginning, and that bothers me. And I wanted to ask you if you guys were bothered by it as well. The question was basically, what if you have a foreign power who sends in an airplane and blows up some buildings? What are you guys going to do? Are you going to invade? How is it that you respond to a terrorist act, let's say like the 9/11 attack?
I mean, is this under the proposal of anarchism? Is this under the supposition that we live in an anarcho world?
Yes. Let's assume that we're living in Ancapistan, and we now have DROs and we have insurance agencies and we have all that. You know, what is going to be the response to a foreign power? Let's say that they're a religious power that has chosen for fundamentalist religious reasons to blow up something.
All right, so how I understand anarchism is that there are no states in statelessness. So the fact that there would still exist nation states.
Well, just a region. I mean, we happen to have the entire, U.S. The United States is now turned into, an anarchist paradise. Okay, where we all have our own things and everything's going just fine. But there's a building in New York City that somebody flies an airplane into because of their religious fundamentalism. What is the response? How does that happen? What would happen as a result?
Well, the people, if we lived in Ancapistan, I mean, who could we retaliate besides the people who maybe, planned it directly, but definitely the people who the plane into the building. But at that fucking point, they're already dead. So what else can you do? I mean, you can't sue their family. Their family members aren't directly responsible for their actions. So, I mean, it would be a tragedy. We chalk it up to the game of life, and we'd move on about it. I mean, we'd probably create some protective measures or create some kind of defense system to do so. But as a whole, I don't think that there's much you can do in that context.
Well, did you hear? I mean, Victor's response was basically starting to go into why that this wouldn't be an issue at first, and then he finally kind of like gets around to, well, people would take up arms to defend their property.
Yeah, at first when he started down that road, I was with him and I was nodding and I was saying, yeah, that's right. We do stir the hornet's nest all the time. We meaning our government. But that doesn't, the Native Americans did not go over to Italy and France and Europe and say, hey, we don't love your prosperity over there. We're going to come kick your ass. That was not a response to anything that the Native Americans did. White people came over here and annihilated other people by the hundreds of thousands, virtually unprovoked, just to basically take their resources. So his argument, I don't think, is a very just one, that might not happen as a peaceful society that doesn't go stirring the shit.
Yeah, definitely. As far as the things that I think that would happen is, number one, there would be an insurance company that would pay out all the people who were hurt in the incident. You're going to have a big amount of payout. Now, this being the case, and they don't have a government institution that is taking the burden away from the insurance company from providing the redress that is appropriate, you're going to see that these businesses, as a model, are going to have to do preventative care to prevent these types of things from happening. So what are they going to do for preventative care? Well, the market will figure some things out, but I think that amongst them would be that there might be spy networks that would seek out groups that may have some sort of violent tendencies associated with them, extremist Islam, for example, and pay off people to be contacts for them and provide them information. And of course, there's going to be information sharing between the two, the different DROs, just like you will see that Visa will let people, let's say there's a bank, well, I don't know, maybe not a bank, but there's a business that has a customer come in and they write a phony check. Lo and behold, that business ends up communicating to all these other businesses that this guy is writing bad checks. It happens already in our current society. So if we have a business that has information that shows that, all right, well, these guys are planning on doing some sort of military action to harm our various different businesses, and we don't know which building they're going to attack, or maybe we do, there is an incentive for them to share information with other insurance companies, whether it be, if you provide credible information, we'll pay you, back and forth type of agreements and things like that. So maybe they'll end up mounting, surface-to-air missiles near tall buildings. Who knows? There would be a variety of different approaches that would be taken, and whichever one was the most effective and cost-effective by using the market forces to determine what actually needs to be done. Perhaps it may come to the point where, yes, to be the most effective means of deterring the attacks from a foreign source, that you would have a contracts where you would basically letters of marque, where you would say have a reward given out for the assassination of various different people in power who are talking about the idea of attacking these peaceful people on the other side of the planet. I don't know, but I do know that there would be market forces that would drive these different solutions into the one that's most effective, or the methodology that that reduces the amount of continued backlash, that doesn't stir the hornet's nest. Maybe it's just buying these people off, but I don't know. Whatever it is, it's going to be a competition, and somebody is going to come up with a really good solution.
Well, yeah, I would argue, that's a great point. But I would also note that absent of the state, you would have, I would imagine, you would have people on board of these airplanes who have weapons. I think one of the tragedies of 9/11 was the fact that the reason why the crazy people could get away with it, is the fact that they were the only ones that are really armed. during the whole situation. So if the whole border's armed, maybe it wouldn't, the atrocity wouldn't happen. But let's say it did get crashed, a building, get wrecked into and killed a whole bunch of people. Well, and we find out this lunatic hiding behind cave in X country is the one who planned the damn thing. I don't see why it wouldn't get a whole bunch of 150 pissed off people, family members, who can't go and find, let's say, some assassination team or something, and pay them in order to go overseas and shoot the head leader. Because generally, when you shoot the head, normally anyhow, the followers generally scatter in the absence of that. Very rarely do you sometimes you have to have a shifting over another person getting in the head, but normally of small groups and whatnot, especially if there are communes or something, small group. Once you kill the head, the group generally goes by the wayside.
Yeah, but we might.
I think that would be the response, or more than likely would be a proper response to the pissed off family members of the victim. Have every right to go after the perpetrator of the guy who killed their beloved ones, and happened in this case be Osama bin Laden, right? So that's what I would predict may have happened in a free society.
Yeah, it certainly
similar to a letter marquee.
Yeah, it may go that way, but the thing is that maybe that has blowback problems, and so if we have a policy that if there's some market force that suggests that we do that, then there is blowback, then there's going to be an additional increase in cost, and so the response to that would be to try something else, and so we would see other solutions thrown out there if that one is actually fair, cost inefficient, and doesn't actually prevent future problems.
Victor did make another good point too, along with this, and that is that as a free society, we would not have sanctions against certain groups of people as far as trade is concerned.
Oh yeah.
So it's very likely that people from all over the world would have a vested interest, a financial interest, in not attacking a free society because they do so much business with them, and so small cells of crazy people and small little religious fanatic groups would not really get the state support that they might otherwise in our current system.
And then I think that airplanes, let's say, in that system of anarchism, would probably mitigate for such occurrences as hijackers. There may be some kind of override that can be implemented to make the plane land wherever if someone did hijack it. And you could if you can operate a drone from the ground, you damn sure can operate a 747. I imagine it's the same. Everything's the same. But I think that there would be all of these other things put in place to prevent that situation from even happening in the first place. And people would probably, hey, if it happened once, they say, hey, look, I'm willing to pay extra $100 to get on an airplane with armed guards that have been vetted, that I know that they're not gonna overtake the plane, and or just that these planes have overrides that they can be landed wherever, whenever, if they stop being communicative with the head tower. Or if their flight pattern changes without, receiving the proper permission. So I think, too, that you said that the insurance companies would have payoffs. I think it would be the insurance companies of the people who did the crime. Because I imagine to be a part of a DRO, you would have to sign off that, you're not going to do these things. And should you do these things, their insurance company is going to have to pay out to the victims of that. And so, insurance companies are going to make sure that they vet people and mitigate the circumstances by which they can even become a member of their DRO. Like, you're going to have to take all of these nonviolent courses, or learn about non-aggression principle and sign off on everything, saying that you understand all of this stuff in order to even get a lower rate in order to be DRO certified. Hell, I mean, they might even have airlines that say, hey, look, if you don't have a DRO contract, if you're not a DRO client, you can't fly with us. Or if you do, it's going to be so cost prohibitive that most people wouldn't be able to afford the flight. So there's going to be all these checks and balances to prevent, the possibility of terrorists from taking over planes and doing this in the first place.
Yeah, we have to assume that the question is a legitimate one and that the action actually does happen. So, I mean, we could just create an alternative thing where there's a suitcase bomb taken in and blows up something. So, I mean, when we're dealing with it like a suicide bomber type of thing, we don't really have redress against the person who caused the crime or the damage. But, we certainly could try to figure out where it was that everything came from. Now, there was also a question that was asked about the idea of a infectious disease. If you have a person who has an infectious disease, how do you deal with them? And in my opinion, that it's all about property rights. And you would say, all right, well, if you're going to travel on my road or my sidewalk or in my farmland or whatever, and you have this communicable disease, I'm going to, from a distance say, get the hell out of here, and get that person to quarantine themselves on their own property by threatening to kill them if they don't get off my property. To me, that seems a reasonable way of dealing with someone who is, threatening to essentially, cause massive deaths. But what are your guys' opinions on how Victor handled that question and, just the question in general?
Well, you would think that there would be like some type of health. I mean, most people have some type of health insurance or something. So you would think that that may cover some type of communicable diseases or whatever. And most members of society generally don't want to get sick, right? So they may put up some type of sign on their property. If you want to deal with me, you have to make sure that you're not carrying anything that is an immediate, it's almost the most likely threat to be able to, and not like one of those needles or coughs or something. It's a real big disease, I think is what he's worried about.
Yeah.
Looks like, if I'm not mistaken, kind of like
The plague.
a major disease.
Right.
If you're going to deal with me, you make sure you don't get that. And I would imagine that an insurance company that deals with him would also likely want him to be as healthy as possible, and thus would demand that for him to do business, that he would have to be quarantined or get immediate seek immediate attention from healthcare providers. I would imagine that probably about the route it's going to happen if you want to have insurance on the long time, particularly especially affordable insurance, right?
Cody?
It seems like such a far-fetched question to me to begin with. I mean, what do we do right now? What instance can we think of right now that this happens where somebody has a disease that's so bad that them being in the vicinity is going to kill you, and then they intentionally come over and spread that disease? I mean, does this even happen?
I guess not, but there was one. There was a woman that she had a casual sex encounter. I forget where it was, and she got AIDS. And after having that happen, she was determined to have sex with as many guys as possible because guys were responsible for her having AIDS. And
in my opinion, that should be handled just as readily as if she had a gun and went on a killing spree. It's the same thing. And maybe she didn't go on a killing spree. Maybe she just went around and capped everybody in the knee that she could find. Spreading a disease knowingly is just the same as using a gun. So I think the question is sort of a weird red herring kind of thing.
No,
AIDS.
it happens very often in our civilization. You see it mostly with AIDS. Yeah, but I think it's a lot with kids who grew up with AIDS. Uh, they they grow up and they're shit. They had it their whole life, and so they're sexually active without telling people that they have AIDS. And I've seen it the most with them. I've seen it with a guy who was like some kind of wrestling uh, star or like come up. He had AIDS. He was spreading it to women and putting them in danger. And exactly that's right. You deal with it the same way you would deal with someone wielding a weapon and harming people. This is if the person didn't get AIDS and they're lucky, and that person is definitely should be charged with attempted murder.
Okay, so I think we've answered that one a bit fairly clearly. There was a question from the, well, not really a question, but a comment that was.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. There was a comment that came in the in the comments area during the debate that said rights are a social construct. Both parties disagreed with that statement, but I wanted to get the panel's kind of like position on that. Are rights a social construct? What do you think, Matthew? Matthew?
No, nothing.
Nope. All right. Cody?
I think both panelists actually did pretty well answering that, in that it just depends on your definition of what rights are, because there are misconstrued rights, quote unquote, that are put forth that are not really rights, and those are a social construct. Those are obvious. You don't have a right to healthcare or whatever, and also sometimes these rights. By rights, people mean it should just be given freely to you, and that's a very odd misconstruing of the term rights. So I think of rights as natural rights. I have the right to exist because I was born. It's inherent in our species to be born and be able to live and defend ourselves, etc. So this is where other rights extend from. I have the right to protect myself, to eat, to keep the fruits of my labor, because those are the tools that I'm naturally endowed with to survive, to live. I mean, it's inherent in being human. So I don't think it's a social construct.
Any comment from you, Kyron?
It was interesting. I was getting in this conversation probably about a year or so ago with this guy from Alaska, and he said something that kind of like stayed with me and rattled my brain a little bit. He was like, "Show me a right, and I'll show you a unicorn." And I've never seen a right. A right isn't something that's tangible. I think it's just something that we all sort of agree upon, and it really is kind of subjective. Now, the issue is what are the universal things that we agree upon, and I think going from there, those are exactly right. Exactly correct, Cody, in saying that you don't have a right to universal health care. Because in order for you to have universal health care, then you have money stolen from other people in order to provide you with those. So, if we want to get technical, rights are things that you do have and will have as long as no one else is stealing from you and you aren't stealing from anyone else to have those particular things. And for a lot of the things that we have been told that are rights, that are considered rights, require the initiation of force in order for those rights to be given. So anything that has an initiation of force as an implicit part of it is not a right.
Okay. I would say that to me, rights is an abstraction that it confuses the issue, and there is no real such thing as rights. There is a consistency principle that you can follow, which is basically that if someone steals something, they have consented to have everything that they have stolen, because by their actions they have indicated that they do not accept the principle of ownership, and so they can't claim ownership. Now, to own something is theoretically, I have a right to own whatever it is that I own, but realistically, all you do is you just steal back everything that they steal, and if they try to take it, then you defend it, and these are actions. And so what ends up happening is that you come up with a system that is dealing with redress, redress, and pragmatism. And so when it comes down to a violation that occurs, you have a claim of redress, and you can act on it, or you don't have to act on it. But I don't use the term rights whenever I'm talking with people about things. I just say, did something happen where you could claim that a consistent rule, if applied, would enable you to use redress, use your claim of redress to act upon that actor. So if somebody, let's say, if somebody slanders or libels me, I have no real claim of redress, I don't believe. I can, send out communications that suggest that this person is lying. I can try to persuade the marketplace of thought that, hey, yeah, this guy's full of crap. But I can't simply go out and say, all right, well, I'm putting them's fighting words, I'm going to put a bullet in your head. Because his actions have not, as a rule of consistency, have not created a personal claim that he accepts violations of his person. Whereas he certainly does accept the libel and slander of himself when he does that. So actually, a question for you guys then: is there some sort? How would you act, or what would would there be a DRO that protects you against slander and libel? Is there some sort of claim on that there would be some action that would be done by a DRO to protect your reputation?
Well, I think in a free market, there's going to be services for anything you want, pretty much. So now what kind of recourse they might have, like you just said, they may not have much recourse, but there already are PR companies, etc. So I think if you're in a position to where slander is going to do you a lot of damage, like for me, it really wouldn't do a ton of damage as far as like my online presence. If somebody came out on Facebook and just talk crap about me endlessly, probably would not affect my life much. If I am a more well-respected entertainer or something like that, and it kept people from coming and seeing my movies because they thought I was a child molester or something, that probably would affect me more. So I think if there's a market for protection from slander, then there will be DROs who respond to that. But probably, like you said, through PR campaigns, perhaps insurance claims or whatnot, to try to counteract that type of thing from happening.
Kyron?
Will there be DROs that provide
Reputation.
slander protection?
Yeah, reputation protection.
You said what?
Reputation protection.
I mean, people will sell water to a well, if allowed to. So there won't be government to stop them. So if you want to buy it, you can buy it. Hell, if you want to buy real estate in heaven, I'm pretty sure somebody will sell you that as well. it's anarchism. If you want to voluntarily, fall for the okey doke, uh, go ahead and be my guest. But you're exactly right, Cody. I think that if you are someone that's very wealthy and you say, hey, look, this happened, I can show that there's losses, to go after this guy to accrue the losses that I suffered because he said that I had a small penis or whatever it is that, may cause slander and people not show up to your show and you lose all kind of money. Yeah. I mean, shit, people get their legs insured.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as far as the idea that somebody's reputation being damaged and then they're losing money because they're not getting to sell the tickets to their shows or something like that, or nobody will go to them to buy houses because they've had a reputation campaign against them that's suggests that they sell lemons in houses. Well, then I think that realistically there is no claim of losses there that is legitimate to me. There is a claim of that you want to change the perception of your particular thing, and you would use a PR campaign like Cody was talking about, and there would be people who would offer those services, but the thing is that it's no different than, let's say, if somebody comes out with another product and says it's better than yours, and then you lose business. Well, maybe they're telling the truth, maybe they're not, but they're causing you losses, which aren't really your loss. You didn't have a prior claim on those purchases before they happened. You can't claim to own a sale that didn't already happen. Know what I mean? So in any case, I think that was there any other point that you saw that during the debate that you wanted to bring up, guys?
Just one last thing. Sorry, Matthew, did you want to say something? You're muted up, dude. Still can't hear you.
No.
Okay, well, it's kind of a good segue for my last point that I wanted to make, and that is that a lot of people who tend to, and I don't really know if Simmons was actually trying to debate the non-aggression principle. He seemed to advocate for it in most instances, but I guess maybe he was playing the devil's advocate. But I guess if my point was constantly making me play the devil's advocate, I'd consider my point that I was trying to make. But he used the example in the of non-aggression principle applying to the world, and that we're aggressing against the world, or that in a free society somebody could come up against you as an environmentalist and say you're violating the non-aggression principle because you are consuming from the world, and kind of maybe a nihilist perspective or something. But what he seems to be, and I see this happen over and over and over again when people debate the non-aggression principle, is that they just don't understand what the non-aggression principle is. The non-aggression principle has to do with ethics, and ethics apply to human interactions with humans. So if I'm polluting somebody's property, that's a violation of the non-aggression principle, because that's a violation against that person, and I'm polluting their property. But to pollute my own property, or to be somehow violating, the earth itself has no rights because it's amoral. There's no ethics involved in inanimate objects or trees or whatever, So I either own the resources or I don't in a free society. And if I don't own them, somebody else owns them, and I'm violating their rights, or if you want to say rights, I'm violating their person and their property. And so, there's no confusion to me as far as the non-aggression principle and what that covers and what it doesn't. It covers human interaction. And So I thought that his illustration of that was verging on the ridiculous, and I think it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about too, as far as the slander things. You can't just extend the NAP infinitely. It has to do with just human interaction. I mean, your property, meaning yourself and the fruits of your labor, the things you homestead, etc. It doesn't go beyond that.
Well, I mean, I am of the yoke and of the understanding that we could not exist without the earth, and that we are a part of the earth, and because our food, our water comes from the earth itself. So if you pollute it, you pollute yourself, and because we don't live in sort of these isolated environments, it behooves you to pollute your land because, of course, eventually, through the understanding of science and what osmosis is, that stuff you put on your land is going to want to end up on everywhere else in the world in order to equilibrium. That's just the way the world we live in works, the universe we live in works. Everything is trying to find equilibrium or not quote unquote equilibrium, but just a balance and be sort of on level. So polluting your own land is you're killing yourself. You have the right to kill yourself, but you also run the risk of killing others if you use, say, dynamite to kill yourself, or you pollute your land and do so. You run the risk of hurting your neighbors and being sued in the process. So yeah, you own the land, but I think that you also, especially if you're going to have children, you're going to realize that you have a responsibility to make sure that that land is well enough for your children to then live there and not suffer any diseases or ills from doing so. Because part of leaving your legacy behind, and what statism doesn't allow you to do is leave your legacy behind. And I think that's why so many people end up quote unquote polluting it and destroying the earth and its life surviving or life-giving mechanisms, is because of the fact that ultimately, no matter what they do, they can never own the land. The state always will, and so when there's the ability to be able to leave your land that you owned and possessed and cultivated to your children, and there's no risk that anyone can steal it from under them, then you're going to take better care of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely incentive. I mean, you're talking about incentives. There's tons of incentives to care for your own property, but there's nothing specifically unethical about destroying your own property.
Not at all. Not at all.
If I want to take a baseball bat to my own car because I'm frustrated with it, it's my car, So I just think that the non-aggression principle needs to be recognized as an ethical construct. That it just applies to the interaction between people, and not necessarily their own property, but the property of others.
Right.
I think that this particular...
And not animals either.
Well, I mean, that's where I'm going to take this. This particular perspective that anarcho-capitalists have is a very touchy one for certain things. I own some dogs. I choose to set up a dog fight between my dogs. Not much anybody can claim about it in an anarcho-capitalist society. They might socially ostracize them, but if you've got a significantly large enough population of people who like dogfighting, there might be a town where dogfighting becomes normalized, and they have all the food that they need. They got all the stuff they need. Now we're having all these dogs that are bred to fight and end up killing other dogs and so on. Is that what do we have to say about that? My opinion is not a damn thing. Sorry, people are going to kill dogs.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, this kind of goes back to the what if scenario, because in other countries right now, many people eat dogs and they carry around live dogs in big baskets and treat them like food. I mean, it's nasty, right? The way they treat dogs. There's dog fighting, cockfighting, bullfighting. These things already exist. So it's kind of one of those what if situations. Like, well, what if? What do you mean what if? It's already happening right now. So why would a stateless society be any worse than what we have right now? And I know, I think if there's something that really bothers you as an individual, it's up to you to crusade and maybe educate people and say, hey, these animals, I think what you're doing is disgusting, and you might find that you have an emotional attachment to them if you didn't treat them like this or whatnot. There's all kinds of things. And Stefan Molyneux has approached this too, and I don't agree with his stance on all animal cruelty, and he's a vegan, and he's got all kinds of things that I don't agree with, but he does make a good point as far as extreme, cruelty to animals can be a precursor for other violent acts with people. If they abuse and kill animals when they're young, may make them more have a propensity to extend that violence to people. And if that's the case, and that's truly the case, then DROs are going to have an incentive, of course, to have cheaper rates for people who don't abuse animals, et cetera, et cetera. So there's also going to be some economic and social incentives to not do those things. But I agree with you, Robert, that ethically we don't have the right to necessarily step in.
And Matthew, you got a point?
Oh yeah, okay. So sorry for that. The reason why I asked is I try to find a way to get in, and every time someone speaks, I wind up muting and unmuting myself too many times to get kicked off. But anyhow, it actually somewhat goes back, when speaking back to the non-aggression principle, goes back to the question of our rights and arbitrary concept, and I actually want to address that to some degree. And the answer to this question, rights, what your rights are largely depends upon what your property is. So if in property, in large part, is somewhat to a degree a social concept, in that it is something that people can recognize that it is yours. Once you have homesteaded it, put a fence around it, your community, society as a whole can say, oh yeah, he's using that property, that he claims it, he's actively working on it, it's his, and we all agree that it's his. And thus when he goes to defend it, society as a whole is going to look, at least most normal rational people look to, okay, he's in the right. So the question, to go to steal your TV, the question is it theft? It depends upon if it's my TV or not. It depends upon who's your TV. The right largely depends upon who depends upon property, whether or not it's your property. So in this case, for example, when it comes to the issue of pollution or what have you on your property, well, is it your property? If it's your property, you're the king of the castle. You have every conceivable right, if you will, to do whatever with it as you damn please and make the rules about it. So concerning that property and control it. So that's the answer I would give on that, to tie the two together. So yes, it's a social contract in that property somewhat is a social contract. But right to come out after property. But I do have one question. Did our stated friend and the minarchist friend ever actually tell us where government has get their consent from? I did not hear that throughout the debate. I just want to make sure that I wasn't the only one.
Well,
you're mine.
By not leaving, by if you don't move, then you've consented. Is apparently the answer to that question. All right. So as far as the idea of the killing the dogs thing, I would say one more point thing. If you are abusing your property in some fashion, there is going to be a market price that's kind of associated with it. Are your abuses so egregious that they cause people to break the covenants that you have as far as property rights? Because at some point people may actually trespass onto your property and take action, violating your rights, and then they will go to court and you will see what the results are as far as if there are arbitration services that will end up ruling in your favor to protect you from your property from these people who are going to initiate violence against you. And I think that there are some things that are so egregious that you would see that arbitration services would basically say, you know what, yeah, we're going to fine him $1. Your property was violated, sorry, but because of the nature of what the violation was and the purpose was, when they broke in and took all of your dogs away and saved all these dogs from your property, yeah, we're going to have a dollar fine. So the market will determine in a lot of ways what how much of these violations that are done in just causes might end up happening. So does that push any buttons before we go? Because I think we're going to wrap it up here at this point. But last comment from you, Cody.
Yeah, the scenario that you just put forth there is pretty indesirable to me because of the slippery slope that it could be.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's not too far of a progression for somebody to put a stick of dynamite in a tree or something because they don't want you deforesting your own property or something like that. So I think that can be a really dangerous precedent, if you will, for the society to favor with the person who's violating rights just because they don't like the way that the other person is using their own property. So I'm not saying that you're wrong, that the free market is going to decide these kind of things, but I can see that being a very, very sticky situation, and also giving people license to just say, hey, if you think you have the moral high ground, then go, you go bust down to anybody's property you want, because, hey, ends justify the means, right?
Well, I think that basically what would end up happening is that you might actually see instead. I don't know. It's kind of similar to the argument. Let's say that you're in a gun store. You're looking at buying a gun. The guy goes into the back to do something. Across the street, you see a gang of hoodlums that are accosting a woman and slapping her around, and you think that they're going to go more dangerous. You grab a gun, you steal it, and you go and accost them. Does the gun owner have a claim of redress against you? Absolutely. But when that claim is done, what would the punishment be? A lot of people might actually say, well, we'll go ahead and fund your we'll help pay for the damages done to the gun owner.
Right.
As a society. So maybe as a society, a bunch of people would come together and also fund the defense or pay the restitution to the dog abuser, so as to offset the people who violated the property rights. So then he buys more dogs and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. It's just, to me, there is kind of a, when it comes to that particular thing, I think there is kind of going to be a point where violence would end up being used to express particularly hypersensitive positions on things like protecting animals. In the case of, let's say, we had another example we were looking at when we were talking to Chris Cantwell. If there was a what's it called? A cult. And so you've got a cult. They have their own property. They're all completely, independent. They're self-sufficient. They have their own land. They grow their own food. They make their own clothes. They, they have sheep that they shear for making their own clothes and things like that. They've got, their own water source. They use whatever it is, and so you can't really, there's no ostracizing going on there because they don't interact with anybody. And this particular cult has a policy that basically once the female children reach a certain age, they're brought forward to the males who are in the position of ruling over them to become their concubines. And boy children, unless they're they kill any male that is born beyond after the first one. So every female is allowed to have one male child. and after that they just keep having more female, more and more girls. So, all right, well, this place exists. What's going to happen? There's going to be some people who are violently opposed to this. They will go in with guns blazing and they will take action. Then there's going to be a claim of redress from the cults. And what happens in that arbitration? How do you deal with that arbitration?
Well, I would argue that in this such case, and I argued the case, for example, when you have, say, your neighbor, the child abuser, to me, I treat them as the same thing. You have every right to go in and, well, kidnap the children and from the dad. If you, in effect, it's kidnap, but you're, because in my view, once you start abusing a child, you, for all practical purposes, gave up all custodial claim to the child. So
But
your
not property
neighbor,
rights.
let's say, huh?
But not property rights.
Well, no, it's custodial right, though. I mean,
No, I'm talking about, but
somewhat
I'm talking
different.
about the property loss in the process. If you're going to break into their place to abduct the child, you're going to break a door, you're going to break a lock, or you're going to break a
Well,
window.
yeah, I agree that you're technically violating someone's property. You're breaking into their own property, but you're doing it. In my view, you have every if let's say the in my view that you have every right to go in and protect that child who or someone who's otherwise can't protect themselves. In this case, if the child is being abused, if Joe Schmo down the street, we call him a police officer, has the right to do it. I argue we have the same right to do so as well. I would argue that in such a case, let's say if this some type of case with arbitration, and this abuser says, "Look, he broke into my property," the proper justice would be, well, yes, he did. Okay, we'll go and give him a fine for kicking down your bloody door. But look, you're violating her property, right? And she, meaning her body, the young woman's body, and Bob over here saw it, and he felt like it was his duty, if you will, to protect them. So in this case of a cult, bunch of individuals have every right to violate to break in, and assuming that we know that this is what they're doing, to break in and steal the girls, or kidnap the girls, if you will, to save them, protect them, and then from this horrible situation, and to charge these cult leaders with not just rape but also murder. Because once we established that these guys were also murdering children or whatnot, boys, and you can also charge them with murder. In my view, is the way that it'll do it. And of course, these groups have every right to file charges back. And of course, let's say you watched like the People's Court or whatever, where you have a tort claim. Someone said, "Okay, I'm filing a tort against this person for $5,000," but the the defendant may countersue. So I think in these situations, you may have that happening, where you have a suit and a countersuit, where the judge may rule in the favor of both.
I think that a strong case could be made too that any use of force in that instance is actually a defensive use of force, because you're defending somebody who cannot defend themselves. So I don't know, that could be one way of looking at that.
Okay. That's an interesting question, but I mean, to me, it sounds very much like the other situation that we were talking about. And then you said that there was a slippery slope. Well, they claim that I'm defending someone being Fido.
I think the difference is animals versus people, and I had said previously that in my view of the non-aggression principle, it deals with human interaction. Ethics are human interaction and human property. So I view animals as property. Even though, I may love my cat, I'm I'm not above the fact that I'm a carnivore, and I don't believe that animals have the same ethical code that humans have, or capability of it.
At least until they communicate to us that they demand them.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've kind of run our course, and we've gone to an hour and a half. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Again, thank everybody for joining. Kyron has left us, and thank you, Matthew and Cody, for joining, and of course Michael Shanklin for hosting Voluntary Virtues and just creating the Voluntary Virtues Network. I definitely encourage anyone who is listening to this particular discussion. Please subscribe to the Voluntary Virtues Network. We've got a lot of great shows, a lot of interesting producers who are providing some great content for you. So thanks for watching. Peace out.
Thanks, Robert.